Hi, Emma. How are you? Hi, Leo. Hi.
Hi, how you doing? Let me just try and turn you up a bit.
Okay.
Right, how's that? Can you hear us?
I can hear you perfectly. Yes.
What about wind levels? Can you hear the wind?
No, I can see it in the trees, but yeah, it's pretty good on my end. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, perfect.
Okay. Oh, now I hear the wind. Okay.
Oh, it just whipped up just as we started talking. I'm not sure actually. I don't know if I don't know if we can get away with no wind. As long as it doesn't sound too terrible. Um,
Well, if it comes across, then we'll have to do a non-windy day, I guess.
yeah,
Yeah,
okay.
or if you notice it getting too windy, we might be able to just pick up and do it manual because we've got a little tripod.
Okay.
So it looks professional, but if it's too windy, we'll have to just go solo and head
Hold it up to
into the trees.
Yeah, if we could sit under the trees, it might be less windy.
It's not even that windy, to be honest.
Yeah.
Anyway, how are you doing?
I'm doing very well. Thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me today. I'm so
Well,
excited.
thanks for inviting us. We really appreciate it.
Oh, my pleasure, my pleasure. I've been following you on Instagram for a while, and then I saw in April when you did an Instagram live with the Cider Critic.
Oh yes.
Yeah.
Oh, cool. You
I
watched that then?
Yes,
I was
did.
a bit nervous on that one actually, but yeah, it was all right. I think in the end, my first one ever. So
That was your first one? No, I thought it was very, very well. Yes.
oh.
So tell me about you.
I was just really quickly going to ask where you're based because Leo's done a lot of traveling in Canada. So
Only West Coast, really.
Okay, I'm just outside of Toronto.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. So you have family in British Columbia on the West Coast?
Yeah, it's funny because I was in British Columbia and I was in the Okanagan Valley, which you probably know is quite famous for apples. But at the time I was just a silly little snowboard dude who just liked going out for the snow. And I just didn't know anything about it. And now I've come back and I'm nowhere near. I would have been, exploring all the apples. But there you go.
Oh, so you came before you got into cider.
I think we'll have to go back and visit. We've got friends there, so we'll have to go and explore the apples at some point. So sorry, far away. What you saying?
No, I just said the cider industry in British Columbia is really exploding, so I'm sure you'll really enjoy a trip there. And then obviously come to Ontario as well because we've got lots of wonderful cideries as well. So how did you get into cider making?
So we have been running a community garden. I don't know if you get community garden. I mean, you must get community gardens in Canada. I don't know if they're called the same name, but just a garden that kind of supports people in learning to grow their own fruit and vegetables, and working with local residents and schools and probation people. Lots of different types of people, and we were just looking for stuff to do out of season. So once we'd grown all the vegetables, it gets to kind of October, November and winter time. And I was just Googling, like, what can you do on a community garden in the winter? And I came up with Apple Days. It's quite a big thing in the UK where we have like a National Apple Day on the 21st of October. And so I was like, oh, that sounds great. So we bought a tiny little basket press, and we got like one of the guys on the allotment was a sort of engineer of types, and he just rigged up this amazing bike-powered apple scratter. And so we would just have all these kids and people, intergenerational, loads of different people, all just cycling and crushing apples and then pressing. And we made so much juice that we just naturally thought, well, we're just going to have to let it ferment. And then people started trying it and going, oh, it's quite good.
So I was just going to say, do you know what allotments are?
Do I know what allotments are? Yes.
You have allotments in Canada?
Yeah.
Sorry to sound really ignorant. It's just a bit like...
I didn't know, because I can remember someone saying, what's an allotment? I can't remember what country they're from, but
okay.
You know that's where we came from. It's a very communal sort of place to have a community garden, and everyone's got a similar sort of interest in growing things, so it's pretty easy to set up an apple day. And to grow anything you want to grow, it's a good place to start, really. That's where we started.
Yeah, and then we just had loads of people bringing apples and saying, oh, actually, we've always had these apples that drop and we don't use them. And it's really kind of spiraled from there, really, because then we started just seeing apple trees everywhere. Like we realized that it's quite inner city, so, well, it's sort of the suburbs of a big, a city, and there was just these rows of apple trees on this. It's actually one of the oldest council estates in Europe, so it's like loads of council housing. But they'd actually, when they built this huge council estates, they lined the trees, the streets with these apple trees, these ornamental apple trees, which nobody ate. They just used to drop and rot on the ground. And we started making cider with them, which is what we've got. Our Clifton Beauty is one of our range. And it started making some really good cider, and then we started winning awards with this cider when we entered it into sort of camera competitions, and then that was it when we started thinking, right, actually, let's maybe take this the next level. And then also kind of another story that kind of relates to it, but you've probably heard of Ross and Y Cider and Perry Company, who's obviously a big influence of ours and of a lot of people in the UK, and doing marvellous things and have been for years. And we happened to stumble across them on our little honeymoon after we'd got married. And this was a year after we'd been sort of sampling and trying different ciders and trying to kind of create our own. And then when we saw their outfit, we asked if we could we just sort of walked in and they were all drinking cider in the cellar. And we were like, can we stop and park our car and just sleep here for the night? And they were like, yay. And then when they heard we just got married, then the cider started flowing, and we ended up staying for 2 or 3 days and helping them press apples, didn't we? And then they just sort of became our mentors, and we took it from there, really. And it's just grown.
It's proper old school West Country farmhouse style cider, like tapping a whiskey barrel and just straight out the barrel. That's it's quite a rare thing to see that, to pour a cider out of a 210 litre whiskey barrel. It's a beautiful thing. So.
Wow, well, that's kind of an incredible story. Like, I mean, so it came about from what you were doing already for your community, and then your community brought this, I guess, need to you, right? Because they had their apples and they wanted to do something with it, and I know that part of the proceeds also go back into your community as well, don't they?
Yeah, that's right. So they've been going back into the community garden for 12, 13 years now, and then now we've become such a large entity that we're actually setting up a sort of charitable organisation that's going to focus on tree planting, because we've actually for the last 8 years been funding, some of the cider money has been funding tree planting around the city. So we go and plant mini orchards in scrubland and public spaces, parks, playgrounds, schools, all different places, to kind of encourage just there to be apples and pears being grown everywhere, so people can have access to free fruit. Because just about trying to make climate change, obviously that's a big thing, but food security, and just encouraging the younger generation to kind of embrace the fact that you can grow fruit and just pick it out when you're out and about, and it can be free food. So we're going to be splitting slightly from the community garden in the next sort of 18 months. Still working in partnership with them, doing tree planting in Nottingham, but actually setting up a tree planting charitable organisation that's going to focus purely on getting more trees out there to the community.
It's going to be like payback, because we've had so many apples for free for so long. It's about time we planted our own apples for other people.
Yeah.
I mean, the people who planted this, Emma mentioned these ornamental apples, the Wisley crabs, we've recently found out after pressing them for about 7 or 8 years, longer, but anyway. We finally found out what they were, because it's quite hard to identify some apples. And the Wisley crab makes a cracking cider, even though it's not technically a cider apple. It's like a very mild, bittersweet. So, no one was eating them, but actually they make a really good cider with a very sort of caramelly, sort of vanilla-y flavour of its own. And it's a testament to show you don't need cider. You don't just need your bitter sweets and bitter sharps. You can use, you get the right russets or the right type of apple, then it's really good. But whoever planted those, I just think it's like respect to them for doing it. Whether they thought people were going to use these or they were just planting purely ornamentally, but a lot of the other trees we found have been planted, and you just think someone did that for the future generations, and we should do the same in return.
Wow, that's a really it's a really beautiful story you have. Really beautiful story. So it started. You were already giving and doing so much for your community. Now you're expanding that and doing even more for the community. Is that something that has always just been ingrained in you both? Because it seems.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely know planting trees. I've always loved. Well, we've both been into growing for quite a few years now, but I started off growing bonsai trees. I think growing apple trees is just it's like an extension of just growing trees and loving native trees as well. But you know, like grafting apple trees and nurturing them and pruning them and you know caring for them and then cropping them and drinking them. You know, it's just all come. Yeah, it's just what I want to do anyway. And Emma loves it, and yeah, we just seem to be able to do what we like best, and obviously it benefits everyone at the same time. Then you know,
Leo's like a tree. Leo's a tree, not fanatic, but he's just got so much knowledge about trees, and that's his sort of passion. And he, like I said, we'll show you the orchard in a minute, but we've got some news. You're actually the first person that we've kind of shown this particular orchard to, because the story continues from us scrumping apples and like I said about people dropping off apples at the apple day and finding apples on the streets. We luckily came across a few forgotten orchards in Nottinghamshire that we've been able to use, but we've never had our own orchard of our own until now, which is now the breaking news. And we're sitting in an orchard that we've actually planted. This is so exciting because Leo's been able to use, I mean, he really has got so much knowledge about varieties, but he's hand grafted all the fruit trees that you'll see in a minute. So it's using, we've both had a passion for it, but we've both got different things that we focus on. So for me, I've always worked with the community, and I've always been really into sort of making sure there's no surplus food and that nothing, we don't have food waste. Like zero waste is a massive thing that I've always felt really passionate about. I've sort of volunteered with an organisation called Abundance that goes around the city and makes sure that any fruit trees are kind of, this was a few years ago, it doesn't run anymore sadly, but taking that kind of ethos of just sort of seeing fruit trees and then them just dropping fruit and not being used, I just can't bear it, especially because a lot of the communities that we've worked in, there is a lot of food poverty, and generally there's just food poverty, I think, over the UK. And I just feel like, you know, the apple tree is one of the trees here that really grows well, a native tree, you know, in Britain. And if you can plant them for people to enjoy and then use and eat for free, and it's just a brilliant thing. And I've just always kind of liked getting groups involved, and my background was in youth work, and so sort of working with young people as well, and just kind of getting people really interested in growing and pressing apples. And
it's surprising how detached people have got. We've had people at the community garden point at onions and say, "What are they?"
Yeah.
Or, you know, like they're so no idea. Or you know, washing apples and you've picked it off a tree, they're like, "No, you got to wash them." It's like, why would you? You know,
it's
sad,
so.
but,
I think it's just a generational thing as well. It's just that everything is so packaged, isn't it, and over packaged, and the supermarkets just kind of shrink wrap and put everything in plastic, and even things like bananas are in plastic bags in our supermarkets over here. And it's just like, gosh, that's just, you know, at the moment, sadly, only 40% of the apples that the UK consumes are grown in the UK, and yet actually it used to be very, very different. The landscape in Britain used to be very different. If you went back, say, even 100 years, there was so many more orchards, and it was like a really big part of like the culture here was orchards, cider making, or growing fruit, you know, growing fruit to eat, like apples to eat, apples and pears. And then in the sort of 60s, 70s, people were given actual grants to scrub up their orchards and replace them with other crops, because it was just, I'm not sure why, it was just something that was done. It was like a fashionable thing at the time. I'm not sure about the other reasons of why a lot of the orchards have kind of ended up going into disrepair, but it's just, it's just become a thing where we just decided, well, if you can support people and communities having orchards or grow your own, it's just, and the diversity of habitats that you get in them. I mean, I'm going off on a tangent here, but there's just so many beautiful things about an orchard, but also it's going back to that thing of just like supporting local food in your area that can kind of benefit all, really.
Yeah.
So,
Well, when the orchards were scrubbed, what were they replaced with? What crops were they?
It's mainly monocrops, maize, wheat, oilseed rape. Just the cash crops, really. I think the old orchards as well, they would have all been grown on bigger rootstocks, which obviously nowadays, if you want to be competitive selling apples, they all had to be intentionally be grown on M9 rootstocks, tiny little things on wires and posts, and so the supermarkets dictating that they had to be blemish-free, perfect, massive, great, shiny red apples, which probably taste like a bag of water, sadly, is where we are. So all the classic old big, the big old apple trees, they're very rare. I mean, you can still see them in the West Country if you go out to Herefordshire and Somerset. The old farm orchards are still there, but they're getting pretty sparse, because an apple tree will probably only live for 80, 100 years than the big old ones, and there's not many of those left. So I think trying to get the really big trees out, especially the Perry pears as well. I mean, they'll live for 300 years, a Perry pear tree, on a Pyrus, a communist rootstock, not any of these quince rootstocks, on a real pear rootstock or Kirschensteller rootstock. These trees will live for 300 years. So planting one now, and there's sneaky ways of getting them to crop quicker than 10 years. You can start tying branches down and doing certain things. But
they do say pears for your heirs, though.
Yeah. But I do like the idea of planting a tree which in maybe 250 years' time, some 16-year-old kids are going to be shaking the fruit down. And that's a beautiful thing.
That's very beautiful. So the orchard that you have now, you planted some of are trees that you planted, and some obviously were already there?
No, none of it was here. It was complete black canvas. Yeah.
Wow.
So, yeah, we were so lucky. So so basically we're based in Nottingham at the moment, but Leo's mum lives in Cambridgeshire, and she ran a riding school, and she had ponies. But as she started to retire, she had this one field that she stopped putting horses in, and we just approached his parents. His dad was around at the time, and just said, can we plant it up with cider apples? At first they said no. They were like, no. And we actually did them a bit of a proper proposal. We wrote down how many trees we plan to plant and the spacing, and how much cider we could make from it. And then around the same time we started winning some like these sort of camera awards, and sort of dropping that into conversation, like, oh, we just won an award for our cider. And I think they sort of finally went, oh, you're quite serious about this, aren't you? And you thought it through. And we were like, yeah. So with the help of the family, particularly Leo's dad, who's sadly not with us now, but planted up about 280 trees, roughly about that. So
Emma's right. We had to grind them down. We were about mid-30s. You know what parents are like. They don't really consider you as grown-ups.
Yeah.
So we had to work on them
seriously,
for quite a few years that we actually wanted to do it, and they finally let us get in there. So that's 7-8 years down the line.
Yeah, it's about 7 or 8 years, and I think we were just looking. We've just been walking through to find a spot. We're actually under a big ash tree to get some shade, because it's actually a really hot day today, which is great for us, for Britain. Like, oh my god! But
the last 2 years, I think the first year we had made an amount worth pressing. We did 200 litres, and then last year it was 400 litres, and this year they're loaded, and it looks like it's another on year. It's a great thing about these young trees that they crop annually. They haven't gone biennial yet. And it's looking like from 400 litres, it's going to be a lot.
Which is lucky, because the orchards in Nottingham that we have been managing, and all the sort of scrumps trees, we've been driving along some of the estates and looking at the trees, and there's hardly any apples on them. They're having I think because it's further north, and they got hit by like the frost at the crucial time. It's really affected the yield, because we had a really rubbish kind of spring. Basically, it was very wet, quite cold, and it's really affected like the blossom. But luckily, this is a bit further south and warmer, and it's one of the driest areas in the country. So it seems to have escaped the kind of frost blitz, hasn't it?
I'd have to say, I don't know what it's like around where you live, but you just have to drive 2 hours north. In certain parts of the country, which are sort of a bit more hilly, almost mountainous, the apple trees, they just don't grow. Well, they do. Well, some of them are fine, but so many of them, they really don't like it. So, you know, having the right climate get matching the right variety to the right climate is so important. I've seen some very miserable orchards in Derbyshire, which is a couple of hours drive north.
Not necessarily. There are some good ones.
In Derbyshire, yeah, with the right trees. Let's say if you get the right variety,
trees, yeah.
But a lot of the varieties I'd grow here, no chance. They're just cankered, and it's just very sad. But
so, how did you choose which varieties to plant, and how many different ones? I can only imagine.
Because I knew in East Anglia it is so dry and it is so much warmer, I knew pretty much anything's going to work. And sure enough, they are just booming, all of them. There's not a single variety here. Well, yeah, I've got about 15 dessert apples, which some of them haven't started cropping yet, so I'm not sure exactly if they're all going to work. But we have chosen most of the varieties for organic cultivation. So, you know, big on disease resistance. That's one of the main reasons. And what I've realised after researching a lot of the cider apples, the reason there's there's the top 10, the Dabinets, the Michelins, the Tremlett's Bitter, the Yarlington Mill, the Somerset Red Streak. The reason they're grown so commonly is because they do just have everything. You know, they have disease resistance, they have good growth habits, they have heavy cropping, they have regular cropping. You know, there is a reason all these old farmers have been doing it for so long. And actually, we've chosen a lot of those more common ones because, in fact, if you want to grow without using too many chemicals, then you do want something which is scab resistant and mildew resistant and canker resistant. Not that I'm scared of a bit of canker, but anyway. You'll have to stop me talking about trees.
Yeah, he will.
Probably want to talk about cider.
He will talk about trees, but we did choose some on the basis of when we've had certain single varieties or certain types of cider that we've really enjoyed from some of our favourite cideries like Ross, where we've just been like, I've loved Yarlington Mill and I love Harry Masters Jersey, so like it was really important that we had those trees in our orchards. So yeah.
Although I did miss out Stoke Red, and I've fallen in love with Stoke Red. Such an amazing apple. We've planted 90% bittersweets because I thought there's loads of sharp apples locally. I don't need to plant any sharps. But now I've realised how good Stoke Red is. I'm just like, I should have planted a few.
There's probably still space for another line or so. We could probably show you in a minute. I don't know how it will work with me walking. Do you want me to? Should we spin around and have a little look?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Should we try that? I'm going to try. I've not done this before, so you stand up with me because I need to. So, I don't know if you can see. I don't know if you want us to walk through the. Oops.
Yeah, anything that you want to show would be great. I mean, it's just.
So.
Yeah.
I'm kind of gonna. If I do that for Leo, you walk forward and I can just do that, and you can do a. Well, you have to tell me if it's a focus because I can't see. Leo.
Oh, this is so exciting. Yeah.
Down a bit.
Bring it down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, so you can't see it.
Wow. So these are all about 7 or 8 years old?
Well, actually, these are some ones just planted last year.
Okay.
So they've just been grafted. You can see, you can see the graft. I don't know if you can see that. Anyway, it's just a stick in the ground, to be fair. But let's go look at some of the bigger trees.
Do you want to talk about the different?
Yeah, you've got. We start off with a couple of rows of the Liz Copas like modern cider apples. She developed loads of these, mainly bittersweets and a few bitter sharps. The Ashton Research Station, and she's crossed some of the cider apples with some of the dessert, like I think it's James Grieve, a couple of the dessert apples she's been crossing them with, and come up with a whole new range of cider apples which have even better disease resistance and early cropping, which seem to be quite important commercially. A lot of them are just grown, they have sort of commercial characteristics, to be honest, but I'm loving it because you get big cider apples, often these little marbles you're normally scrabbling around on the floor trying to pick up. Some of her apples are really quite big. Yeah, and so we've got Julie's and Amanda's here, which I think there's about 12 of this Copas, these modern cider apples, and they seem to be pretty good. One of them's a bit like a Michelin, and the other one's really quite a nice, bittersweet, bitter sharp, sorry. But anyway, there's these ones are planted fairly close together as a centre leader, so they've got, they're sort of Christmas tree shaped, and it's great for, I do like the centre leader for light penetration. But anyway, we'll keep on walking and you'll see some of the others.
So like I said as well, with the with this orchard, we've always been based in Nottingham, and this is the first time that we're going to be making cider out of apples that we've grown ourselves. And basically, I think it's going to really affect the taste of the cider. We don't have any say on how the trees are grown in the other orchards. I mean, Leo's been pruning them and stuff, but they were all planted without us. We didn't create these orchards. Some of them are really old orchards. Obviously, having new trees will affect the flavour of the apple, because I think you do tend to get a better flavour from an older tree, they say. But it'd be quite interesting to see how it's changed. The flavour profile is different with older trees, younger trees, with the apples. But the other thing is there's a big thing at the moment about the terroir and where you produce, how that can affect your cider. So in the UK, they've just done this amazing kind of experiment where they pressed 6,000 litres of juice and gave 1,000 litres to 6 prominent cideries across, I think, mainly sort of Herefordshire, and they all fermented them for the same amount of time, and then all racked them at the same time, and then all bottled them at the same time, and then they've released them at the same time. And apparently the 6 ciders, despite being all the same juice, that from the same tree, so they got this 6,000 litres and they just split it into 6, they're all completely different, completely different, and that's just from being fermented at a different farm or different cidery.
I think it's from Ross and White, the juice.
I think Ross pressed the juice and then they passed it on to Oliver's, Little Pomona, I can't remember, Hogan's and a few others, but it's been quite a kind of interesting display of how even just moving juice or pressing juice in different areas. So we're going to be doing it in Cambridgeshire and in Nottinghamshire. So we're going to be able to bring out some new releases of cider. We're dead excited. This is obviously classed as the Eastern Counties, which has actually got its own style. But when you talk about Eastern County ciders in the UK, quite often it's like an acid led cider. But what we're going to be doing is West Country style cider, but in the East. If that's just to kind of confuse you there. But
so lots of bittersweet.
So the ciders you'll use the apples that you're already using, and then will this be like a new line of
new range? Yeah, a new line. Yeah. So we're going to continue with our our sort of favourites, and we've got a big customer base who really like them, and we wouldn't want to stop making those. And then this will just be expanding our range. So yeah, it's exciting.
Very exciting.
Yeah. So shall I just?
Yeah, Emma had a point about the young trees maybe not producing such good quality as some of the older trees. And I think the main reason for that is the young trees produce bigger apples. Mm-hmm. So it takes much shorter distance from water to get from the roots up to an apple just through a couple of little branches. So you do get quite a lot of big apples in the smaller trees, which basically, I think the water dilutes the apples a bit, and when they get bigger, the apples get smaller. So it gets
more flavoursome,
a bit more concentrated. Yeah. But what I've noticed actually, even though we've only been pressing it for a few years, because it's so warm in East Anglia, the apples are pressing really quite like a vintage year when there's not that much moisture in the apple. It's coming off like syrup. You're not getting much off the press, but what's coming out is like syrup. And it seems like because it's so dry and warm here, we're getting a vintage year every year. I don't know whether this is just me just making it up, but I'm sure that I think we're onto a win in this spot anyway. We'll see.
watch this space, basically.
Yeah.
I will spin around a little
maybe
bit
just
now.
walk along the trees.
So we're just, yeah.
Almost that way.
All right. Where?
So just sort of see as you walk on the trees. There's a couple of younger trees. You'll see. But yeah, we're lucky. All these cider apples, they blossom so much later than the desserts. A lot of the cider apples have missed all the frost. I think that's another one of the reasons they've all been chosen for cider apples, is because they always produce. Well, apart from the old ones get quite biennial if you don't prune them. But I mean, yeah, I don't know if you can see that. That's a good example of a.
Oh yeah.
I'm just randomly pointing it without looking, but that's.
Oh no, I can see. Yeah.
It's a good example of, sort of well spaced out branches, one big centre leader, lots of apples on it, but not too many apples at the top. We've been thinning out all the apples at the top at the moment because you want to keep that centre going up rather than letting it bend over the weight of the apples.
Okay.
But then there's a couple over here actually. I'd say that's an interesting one. There was after all these years crawling around in urban places and in the countryside, trying to find different apples. There are the crab apples and wild apples. We found one just over here, which is it's actually just growing up the side of it's clearly not been planted. And I tasted this apple, and it is the most bitter, disgusting tasting apple I've ever tried. And it turns out that we're not sure. We've got to get it genetically tested to see if it is a recognised variety, which I don't think it is. But it produces such a bitter cider. I challenge anyone to produce something that bitter, and it's well unbalanced, and most people would just not be into it. But if you like your hoppy IPAs or really bitter ciders, when this one's got enough to actually start bottling it, it's going to be quite. I'd love to call it bitter old. I don't know. Got to think of some name.
Yeah, some name.
You've got to have no taste buds for this one, but I think at the moment we're just going to call it Jordan's Bitter because that's our second name, but we'll see where that goes. But yeah, so far so good. It's quite a healthy looking, vigorous growing tree, and yeah, fingers crossed.
So is there any other sort of questions that you...
I have a couple of questions. Your ciders are all still ciders, right?
Well, not all of them actually. Most of them are, but we do a pet nat, and that's in the Colic Perry. So we also do Clifton Beauty in pet nat as well, don't we? But they're because it's we're quite a small outfit. We only make 7,000 litres a year. And the majority of our cider is still, and then so we only do like a few hundred litres of sort of pet nat or bottle conditioned cider. But we've started leaning towards doing the pet nat over the bottle conditioned. So it ferments in the bottle, gives off a secondary fermentation.
I was also thinking recently how I quite like a cider, when it's just really, really lightly conditioned, almost to the point where you couldn't really call it sparkling on the label. I'll see maybe the next one could put on the label like a little bit sparkly. I don't know. It's in between. It's like slightly sparkling cider.
I'm not sure it'd be a cellar though.
Yeah, but it's a really nice way of having it. And also it's a nice.
Yeah. The odd bubble maybe.
Yeah. Petty pet nat.
Yeah, petty pet nat. That'll be it. We'll have to sort of trademark, what is it called when you say that's our own unique terminology for it or something.
And I have to say, actually, it's easier as well. If you do bottle conditioning or pet nat ciders, if the specific gravity is, if there's too much sugar in it, you end up with quite a lot of sediment, and that sediment does have quite a distinctive yeasty taste. Whereas I found if you bottle a cider at the specific gravity of about 1,003, then tiny bit of residual sugar, just enough to give it a bit of life, a bit of effervescence.
I was going to say.
Then that way you don't get those sort of yeasty off flavours, which you quite often do with bottle conditioning.
It can give them a bit of a sort of funky smell sometimes. The yeast, I think, but we're still learning. I think how long have we been doing it since 2000? 10 maybe, but it just feels like you're always learning. And it's like I've always found this even with vegetable growing, like one year you can feel like you nailed it and you know exactly what you're doing, and the next year you'll grow exactly the same thing, and the thing that did really well the year before completely fails, and you're baffled, like, and as you will know, it's just down to like what kind of year you've had. We've had a really unusual weather in the UK. Really, really, really cold spring, really wet and horrible. It's absolutely glorious now, and I really hope it stays. But it always changes. It changes how your trees behave, how the apples behave. You know, the yield you're going to get. Again, just before sort of pressing, you might get a flurry of really strong winds, which knocks them all down early, and then you have to kind of. So it's kind of it really is about having to kind of work around the natural sort of way of things, you know, the sort of weathers and how what's going to be thrown at you, and it changes. It can change the way your cider is, and our cider is not.
So I was just thinking a really good example I can think of. We're pressing some perry, and you leave it over for 24 hours to sort of oxidize to reduce the tannins, because the pears we use, a lot of them are wild pears actually, so they're not actually recognised perry pear varieties, but these wild pears are so tannic, you really have to pick them at the last minute, you know, when they're brown inside and almost mushy. They almost press themselves under their own weight in the bags, and then you leave them for 24 hours to maturate and then oxidize a bit more. But we pressed these pears one a day before, went to press them the next, and then I pressed some also on the day I was pressing the previous ones. And because the second day was warmer, the pears I was pressing on the second day oxidized quicker than I'd done the ones the day before.
Wow.
I don't know if this is also, I'm explaining it very well, but it turns out that just the temperature of the day totally changed the perry. The day I was pressing it was a bit warmer, which made it less tannic. It just
so it totally
changed.
It changes the flavour profile. I'm going to do this way so I can see you. But yeah, it totally changes. That can just change the flavour of your perry just from the temperature of when you're pressing as well, which is crazy if you think about it. So our ciders, and we use the same apples for the different blends, but obviously there's always going to be a slight variation. But our customers never seem to mind, because I think that's the beauty of using a natural product. And in our case, we're just using majority of the apples would well actually in Nottingham 100% of the apples that we use we get for free, and they would have gone to waste. So it's like using products that otherwise would have just rotted on the floor. So it's I think customers are a bit more forgiving, because if they want to get a cider that's going to taste exactly the same every single time they open the bottle, they can go to the supermarket and they can get something that has been carbonated. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but you know, it's a certain, you know, or however, even if it's a still cider. But the smaller producers, there's going to be slight variation just because of the way we're doing things, you know. What we were talking about before about the orchards, and how only 40% of the apples that we use are from the UK. I think another reason why the kind of the bottom fell out the market at one point, and why orchards kind of got lost, was because a lot of the really big cider companies started shipping in concentrate from other parts of, like, you know, Europe and different, you know, so, and because of the UK laws stating that cider only needs to contain 30% apple juice, which is really criminal, really, because, you know, all the small producers we're all sort of saying it needs to contain, you know, over 90% juice, 100% juice. You know, it shouldn't be this such a low figure, and because of that, a lot of these mainstream cider producers are using concentrate and only using 30%, and then the rest can be sort of sugar and water, which gives it that generic taste, but it's also not supporting local orchards, because they don't need the apples as much. So anyway, Leo wanted to show you something on this line. So
that leads on talking about the local orchards, and you know how much better than they are than the big commercial ones. I mean, the wildlife on this orchard is amazing. There's a big old barn owl lives in that ash tree over there, and I don't know if you'd noticed, but some orchardists might be thinking, look at all those weeds, look at that grass. But actually, surprisingly, this orchard, out of all the pockets of trees and orchards I've managed, there's less aphids on these trees than anywhere I've seen. And that's purely just because there's so many beneficial insects, balancing out the aphid population. So it really does show, if you leave a lot of weeds and a lot of grasses, all the ladybirds, all the lacewing larvae, all the birds, all the sparrows, they're all in there doing the good thing. And they're cleaning up your aphids for you. So, in comparison to some of the orchards I've planted in parkland where it's mown to an inch of its life and there's not really much but houses around them, they're just smothered in aphids. So, I think these small, sort of more organically grown, we're not 100% organic. You have to have certification to be organic for 10 years of the previously land use. But we're trying as many organic techniques as we can, and it seems to be working well so far. Yeah. Yep.
Fabulous. Great. Well, I think the last question I have, and this is because I heard you in your Instagram talking about the labels and the breakdancing. You both so if you both want to show some of your breakdancing moves, I won't object.
Go on then, Leo. Walk on your hands.
Well, I saw you like to yodel in the tree in the morning. I spotted you in the picture.
Hey, yeah, that's a good tree, that is, isn't it?
Yeah.
Amazing. I've never seen such an enormous pear tree. It's just gargantuous, enormous.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was our friend designed our labels. You probably know them, Instagram. And it was his idea too. We were going to have squirrels. We were like, oh, they're like urban scrumpers, a bit like us. So we'll just. That's such a good idea. Really like it. And he's always done like line drawings and stuff because he used to run a t-shirt company. And he came up with the dancing squirrels. He was like, well, it's your, because that's how we met. So like dancing together. So yeah.
Well, the squirrels, it's a funny thing. The squirrels, we've just moved to Cambridgeshire, where this village we live in is next to the village where the genetic mutation of the grey squirrel has gone black. So you get these black squirrels, which is unique to Girton and Oakington, where we're moving to. And they're slowly started to spread a bit further around Cambridgeshire. And it's amazing. They're really beautiful, really unique. And everyone in the area sort of knows about these black squirrels. And so we've got to get that on our label, considering we've already got squirrels on our label and we're moving to the home of the black squirrel. So that's definitely something to look out for in the pipeline, I guess.
Yeah.
Are they all grey in Canada?
We've got lots of different kinds. We've got grey, we have black, we have brown.
Black.
Black. Okay,
oh, cool. Because in the UK, it's only in these two, 3 villages, as in England anyway, that there is the black squirrel. I don't know if you get black squirrels in Scotland, but you definitely don't get black squirrels anywhere else in the UK apart from in this particular area within a few miles, and then that's it.
So I know the red squirrel was 100% red squirrels in the UK, and then I've got a feeling the grey squirrel actually came from Canada.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's you lot to blame.
We have so many of them. They're such a nuisance. We had them last year in our attic in our home, and they were running around inside. One got in. So there's quite a nuisance here. So it's quite likely that it's our fault.
Yeah, because there's no red squirrels in the UK. There's no red squirrels apart from in the Outer Hebrides and the small islands.
Well, in Scotland there is.
And Scotland, and so now it's 90% grey squirrels now. But they're good. They do a job. So
I find, they are a bit of a pain, but it just seemed to fit because we're sort of scurrying around the city, scrumping apples, and it seemed that they were doing the same thing. Yeah. And we'd quite often meet them whilst we were scrumping apples. They were like there.
They're after the seeds. They rip apart the apples and just eat the pips.
Yeah, no, I found your labels actually quite unique and quite interesting because with the squirrels and then with the dancing, and then when you said that story about how you met, and then from the breakdancing, I think it's really unique, really sweet.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. Wow.
Nice.
Well, thank you so much for this wonderful chat and tour, and it's been great. Thank you so much for taking the time. I hope your mom had a good birthday yesterday, Leo.
Yeah. She got a cake with candles on, and she's. I've got her into drinking Perry. She's never much of a drinker, but I think she's got to an age where she doesn't care anymore. So she's getting
She does like the Perry, so every time we come down, we have to bring bottles of the Perry for her. So yeah, she had a little tickle.
I have to start telling her off. Actually, she's getting through quite a lot nowadays.
Yeah, she does like it. No, we had a wonderful day because it's just been such nice weather. So yeah.
What are you drinking tonight? You've got some bottles in the background. You drinking?
I do have some bottles in the back, and then I have in my house. I have a cold cellar, and that's where I have my stash, and then in the fridge as well. But I think I'm leaning towards maybe a hopped one this evening. I'm not sure. It's still
nice.
Yeah, it's still morning here. Yeah. Yeah.
So by the time we finish, it'll be nearly lunchtime. You can justify a cider, perhaps.
There we go. I can say, well, it's 5 o'clock in England, so.
There you go. Yeah.
We had a hopped cider, which is the first one I've tried I actually liked, because I've never been a fan, but this one was spot on. It was Beard and Sabre, I think.
Yeah, it was really tasty actually, because
it can be done, can't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. The first time I tried it, I did not like it at all. I didn't like the taste whatsoever. And then I went back to the same one because there were just so many reviews about it and everyone just raving. And I thought, well, you know what? It's different days, taste buds taste different. And I went back to it and I just, I really enjoyed it. And then I have a new one from another company here that sent another hopped. And when they do their hopped for this company, there's like no sugar or anything in it. No residual.
Oh, nice.
Looking forward to trying that.
Oh, that does sound good.
A lot of the ciders in Canada, are they sort of bit of sweets, bit of sharps, bit more so nowadays, or what's predominantly?
It really depends on which cidery you're going to. So you can there's a lot of variety as well in terms of if there's like a fruit infusion or herbs and botanicals. Some are making them with nuts as well.
Wow.
Yeah. It's quite a big range, and then depending on the company now because we're just sort of coming out of lockdown right now where I am, and the benefit of that has been the local cideries like the artisan, the craft cideries. We've been able to reach out and they've been able to ship direct because they aren't available in our stores. It's actually been a year of experimenting with so many other small local cideries.
Oh, and lovely.
Yeah, it's been actually really eye-opening and really encouraging. So it's been really fun. My preference is always the drier organic tasting one. I'm not a fan of the sugar, the Somersby's and whatnot. So
same as me, yeah.
I did have an iced cider a while ago, and that was quite impressive. Very different, unique drink.
It was, but for me, it was
so sweet.
It's quite sweet. I'm definitely on the dry.
I think that might have been Canadian, wasn't it?
It might. I think it was. Or I have to double check. But yeah, I know what you mean. I think with the whole lockdown and Corona thing, it's had obviously a massive effect on cideries. But on a positive, what you were just saying, a similar thing has happened in the UK, where a lot of people are reaching out to the small folk like us and wanting to support them, and it's been really positive, you know. So we've had lots more exposure, we've had lots more people sampling or trying our bottles or talking about us, and yeah, obviously sales drops, but what we found is that bottle sales for us increased you know, tenfold, and a lot of people have wanted to support each other. So cideries coming together to then support each other. We've got the Cider Women Network in the UK that is just a really positive thing that I love being part of, and we've got some things in the pipeline that we're going to be doing, which is exciting. But I'm not going to say much more now. But you have to watch this space. But yeah, but other, you know, we've got little distributors who are supporting, who are approaching us and saying, can we stock your cider so we can get it out there? So yes, from what was a pretty rubbish situation and quite kind of depressing and hard for everybody, there's been a lot of positives that have come out of it, I think. Like we're talking to you now, like that's a really great thing, you know, like talking across the other side of the world and talking about cider. So yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you. There has been so many. I mean, not to make it light of the situation from the coronavirus and the pandemic and the hardships everyone has had. There have been glimmers of incredible little miracles that have been happening. And I think, and what we're noticing here in the cider community is the same thing. There's a lot of, we reach out a lot to each other, whether it's supporting the local cideries or doing these talking tours. And this is my way of traveling as well. And then, and it's just, it's, you know, it's fun for me to then, and then share that video. And we have little cider chats once a month where we all get together via Zoom and just talk about cider, talk about what we like, see where the direction is going, and just share. And I don't think that would have happened, pandemic. So again, not to make light of it, but you know, there are some wonderful miracles that have come.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I wish I could cheers with a cider, but we forgot to bring one down. So that's a shame. But next time, eh?
Yeah.
It's a bit early for you anyway.
I know, that's right. I know. I got the finger too.
Oh, thanks so much for having us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
So, all right. Take care.
Take care. Bye.
See you later. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.